Hey y'all, so we're back with another video. You could have told me you were recording. Anyway, um, so today we're going to talk about retiring from the military. The whole reason for us starting this video blog is to help people with information that we wish we would have had earlier. A lot of younger people who may be in military or military families, and just give people a little insight of what it's like, not just military. We talk about other things, but I think a lot of, or the bulk of the stuff that we talk about or will talk about will probably be military related. So Mike here will be dropping his military retirement paper soon, and we're excited about that. But it has been a journey to get to this point, and we just want to talk a little bit about that today. So I will say that on the way home from church today, we were talking about how I had a conversation with one of the ladies at church who is prior military, and she was saying how um, early on in a previous marriage, she used to um, be dual military with her spouse, and how she noticed that it was a big effect on her kids. And so she eventually ended up getting out of the military, but her spouse was still in the military. And how the coming and going and constantly moving, like it was still, even with her being home, it was still a big impact on the kids. And so I think that's kind of where we are. Like the military for us has been good. We have had, some struggles in certain areas, but for the most part, I don't think we've had it as bad as a lot of other people. But I can say I think that it at some point has an effect on your kids, the constantly moving, the having to say goodbye to family and friends, not growing up around cousins or aunts and uncles and grandparents. And so I think for us, it just got to a point where we were ready to put roots down, and um, I thought it was important that Mike spend more time with the kids. But it wasn't, of course, just my decision. It was something that he had to come to terms with because it's his career ultimately. So, we talked about it. We've talked about it for what, last few years? Oh, like,
22.
yeah,
2022 was the first time I really started talking about it
yeah,
in earnest.
yeah. So we've discussed it a few times, and I always like to let him know where how I feel, but it's not my place to say, hey, you need to retire. But all I can do is tell him, this is what I'm seeing. This is what I think, or how I think it's affecting the kids. And, it's up to him to go talk to the Lord and make that decision when it's time. So if you want to chime in.
Yeah, we had just general conversations on when will we retire, right? When is it time to hang it up? And to this point, plans are all over the place. So it was like, well, I make '05, then I can probably hang out and retire at 30 as an '05. Then I was like, well, '06 retirement means I'll never have to work again. And it's very competitive, a little less than 50%, or excuse me, a little less than, I think, 30%, if I remember right. But, super competitive, but at the same time, can retire and my retirement pay will be over $100,000 in retirement pay alone, not even including disability. And so I was like, well, if we leave Hawaii, we could probably go to Guam because Karina always loved Guam. Go back there, do an EXO tour on a tender, and then try to come back to Hawaii after that. And it was like, well, if we buy a house, we don't want to leave. And so one of my mentors, he did, I think, 4 straight tours out in Hawaii. So I was like, hey, I can try to mimic what he did. And so things were just kind of all over the place. And at one point, I was um, in the running for a job out here that was career enhancing, increased responsibility, checked all the right marks. And I had a lot of people who were saying, like, hey, you'd be good for this job, you have our recommendation. But ultimately, it comes down to, your detailers and community leadership. And unfortunately, I wasn't picked for the job, which was very disheartening at the time because I did want to do it. And that was like how I was going to make '05 and then go out and do another '05 job out here and then look at retirement. And so I was looking at other things to do, other ways to stay Navy, but stay in Hawaii. And Karina one day was like, "What's your goal?" And I was like, "Well, what do you mean? What's my goal?" She was like, "What are your goals? Like, what's the goal for the rest of your career?" And I was like, hmm. It's like, I don't know. And I say that because, or I said that because I had already accomplished all the goals I set out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I joined the Navy, it was like 3 goals, right? Grow up, mature. This is 17-year-old Mike. Grow up, mature, get my degree, see the world. So I have my master's degree now. I've traveled all over the world, and I'm pretty mature for a 40-year-old.
And if I can interject for a minute, I remember when you commissioned as an officer, you told me your goals for commissioning were you wanted to mentor other sailors and give them information that you didn't have, but you also wanted to change policy. And since we've been in Hawaii, you have changed policy, you have written policy, you have implemented policy, you have gone to the boats and trained them on the new policy that you wrote. So in my mind, I was like, I don't get it. I don't know why he's still trying to stay in the Navy. Like, he's checked all the boxes and some that he said he wanted to do. Like, what more can you want?
Yeah, I'm just like, you just keep going, right? Like, that's the whole mentality is like, all right, challenge complete. What's the next challenge? Okay, challenge complete. What's the next challenge? And so we were having these discussions of what's next. And so I had to balance, what's best for me and the family versus what the Navy's asking for, what's in a realm of possible. And around that same time, there are a lot of people in my personal life who are coming up to me and asking, like, hey, what's the plan? Like, when are you going to retire? What's going on? My pastor, it was one day where I was off from work and I went to go volunteer at the church food bank, and he and I end up sitting in the back together prepping meals for the food bank, or bagging cans and prepping all that stuff. And then he's retired Army, and we probably talked 20 or 30 minutes on, what's the plan, my skill sets, what comes after. And his message was consistent of, you're going to be just fine, right? He was like, you can retire today and you're going to be fine. He was like, one, God's going to take care of you. Two, he was like, you're a leader, you have leadership skills, you're well spoken, you know how to engage with people. He was like, you're in a place, you have a niche skill set that's in demand. He was like, you can let it go. And I was like, I appreciate it, like, good advice. But I hadn't come to that conclusion myself yet. And then talking to other friends and family members and old shipmates who had gone on to separate or retire. And so it was just a lot of things that was like, okay, so this is an option. And at the same time, on the personal front, I travel a lot for my job, and I had come back from one of my many trips, and my wife had told me, Karina told me that my daughter wasn't like, it wasn't that she wasn't excited, but she wasn't as excited to see me. And my son, who's younger, was in the van like, Daddy's coming home, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and this and that, and then we're going to do this. And then my daughter was like, I don't know why you're excited. Like, he's going to come home, he's going to be tired, he's going to go to sleep, and he's going to get up and go to work tomorrow, and you're not going to do any of that stuff.
Yep, he's not going to have time because he got to go back to work. And I think for me, seeing her like that, like, just knowing how she used to be, like, she used to have the same energetic, or I guess she used to be so excited when you came home, just like Cam. And then it seemed like every time you would leave, a little bit more of that excitement just like got washed away. And it was like, yeah, he's here, but he's not spending time with us. And I've seen that deterioration of relationships with the service member and their kids, and I didn't want that for you.
Yeah.
So I was like, I see this happening. I'm telling you what I'm seeing. I'm just giving you information I see. You got to do it what you will, and all in the Lord's timing. Because I could want you to retire. I wanted you to retire like 5 years ago, but of course, you got to do it when the Lord tell you to do it. But I've always thought, let me show you what I see from my perspective, because I'm with the kids more than you are. So
Yeah. Well, that was eye opening. That was disheartening and eye opening. So that was another card that was played. And then on the Navy side, like my choice was to stay here. You know, we bought the house and we said, hey, if we buy a house, you know, we're not going to leave. And I know in a fleet concentration area, the largest submarine home port in the Pacific, like there's going to be a job out here for me to do, even if it isn't one that is maybe in my community, right, in my direct line of work. There's something to be done. It happens to people all the time. They kind of go out of designator, out of community for a job, and then come back. You know, it's not preferred, but plenty of opportunities. And so the detailer just happens to be a personal friend. Kids know each other. We were neighbors. We've known each other for over a decade now. And he came out to visit and invited Karina along to come sit down for the detailing visit. And I was like, all right, man, like, what you got? Right. Same conversation you have every couple of years. And he was like, nothing in Hawaii.
mm-hmm.
And I was like, like, there's got to be something out here. And he was like, no. He was like, I got nothing out here for you.
He was like, well, maybe if this doesn't work out, you can move in the job you were supposed to have, but you know it's not guaranteed. And so I was like, well, if this happens, then he's pretty much screwed. And he was like, yeah. I was like, yeah, no, that's not good.
Yeah. So when you look at all the factors, right? So you have the familiar factors with the family, where it was the kids were at a point where they were ready for me to spend more time with them. Daughter's 10, son's 8. Karina and I would say 22 was kind of a rough year. I was gone for probably 3 or 4 months out of the year, on shore duty when you add up all my travel. And so we were gone a lot, or I was gone a lot. Mm-hmm. And then it was just hard to come to grips with what the plan's going to be. Then you had, you know, the external factors of family, friends making recommendations. And, you know, I've been in the Navy. At that point, it was 21 years. And it was like, you know, I've been in the Navy longer than I've been out of it. You know, it was like, how do you come to grips with ending what you've been doing for the last 2 decades, right? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of one of those things where you're in so deep that you don't know kind of how to redefine yourself. And it was something that I had to talk to people about because my identity is that of sailor, right? You know, I've been in the Navy since I was 17 years old and I'm 40 now. And so a lot of what I do, how I speak, how I think, how I interact with people, my decision making, my, you know, the way that I analyze issues are all heavily influenced by the Navy, right? By the submarine force and how we're trained to think and do and operate and assess and so on and so forth. And so having to try to figure out like, well, who am I outside of uniform is hard, right? And it's something that I am still trying to answer the question of because, you know, my time is still overly committed to the Navy. And it'll be that way until, you know, I get relieved and get ready to retire. But this was all part of the thought process of that journey of, you know, is it the right answer to retire? So I took all those factors and sat in a lot of prayer, right? I was like, Lord, what's right? You know, and I kept getting, it's okay, let it go. It's okay, let it go, right? You can let it go. You'll be okay. The Navy will be okay. Your family will be better for it, right? And what was interesting is even hearing that I still wasn't quite ready yet. And I was on the fence like, like, and, you know, we have a saying in the church, whenever God's trying to bless you with something, the devil will have an imitation blessing that will look shiny.
Something shiny.
Yep, something shiny. You're like, ooh, what about this? And there were opportunities being presented in the Navy like, ooh, what about this now? And it was like, well, a little while ago, there was nothing available and no plans. But now, you know, it's like when I'm getting the, hey, it's okay, move on, there's the, ooh, what about this? And so I had to pray on that because they were shiny distractions. And I came home a couple times to Karina like, hey,
and I I was like, the devil will bring something shiny to be like, hey, do this.
Mm-hmm.
And you're thinking it's from God and it's not really from God, because like they always say, God is not the only one that will bless you with something. The devil will bless you with stuff too, but it's to distract you from what God wants you to do.
And it will create heartache and pain.
It will.
Yeah.
And when God blesses you, it doesn't create any of that. So you have to be careful. You got to be careful.
And so, a lot of prayer, a lot of uncertainty. And then, long story short, like I finally was like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to my boss at work, and he told me, he was like, whatever you want to do. He was like, if you want to stay, you'll do great. If you want to retire, you'll do great, right? He was really supportive, and he gave me the space to make the decision I wanted to make. And then I talked to my detailer again, and I was like, hey man, so this, and he was like, okay. And so it seems like as soon as I finally got off the pot, and I just flushed it and said, you know what, here's a decision. It's okay. I'm going to retire.
Mm-hmm.
All these other doors started opening up.
Right? And everything fell in line. Everything has been falling in line.
Yep. From on the work side, my rotation date was this December. And with me retiring, or even before I planned to retire, they had my release set up to show up in October. Mm-hmm. And when I announced that I was going to retire, the earliest I could retire would be September of 24, because I got to do my payback for my promotion. And they were like, hey, we're still going to send the relief out. You'll just have essentially another year at your command. Is your leadership good with that? I went and talked to my boss, and I was like, hey, Captain, can I stay at SubPac and do another year support? And he was like, absolutely. Like, yeah, no problem. He was like, I'll be happy to have you for another year. And he was like, can we do it legally? And I was like, actually, because one of the things that we did under my code was I was able to create additional billets for my community. And so I get to slide into one of those billets. And so it's legal, essentially not double stuffed, but kind of double stuffed. And so I got an extra year at the command, supporting the mission, and, time to prepare and transition. Mm-hmm. And then on the civilian professional front, I travel all over the Pacific. I work with a million different external entities. And when people found out I was retiring, they were like, hey, like, keep my contact information, right? And it was one of those things where they're like, can't legally say anything or do anything, but, you're the kind of person we would want to bring into our organization one day. And so it's been a ton of doors like that, to where the way things are going, I'm going to have a choice of employment when it's all said and done, that keeps us in Hawaii, right? With competitive salaries. So that way, we're not eating hot dogs every night, but
and noodles.
yeah, not eating ramen and hot dogs. And so it was one of those things that, and once I finally ripped off the Band-Aid and felt fine talking about it, it just, more opportunities opened up. Mm-hmm. People were way more supportive than I thought they would be. There were obviously some people who were disappointed, but I would say for every person who was disappointed and who tried to, say, hey, stay Navy, right? There were 2 to 3 more people that were like, hey, congratulations, this is going to be awesome for you and your family. Mm-hmm. And what's cool for me personally is some of the future employment options I think will keep me supporting the mission I do now, which is important to me because I believe in the mission. I believe in the work and what they're doing. It's just that I'm at a point now where, if I had to boil it down to a simple analogy, it was the Navy was going to want more and my family was going to want more. And there's only so many slices of the pie to give up. And I was already depriving myself of my own time. Mm-hmm. I was trying to give whatever free time I had either to the Navy or to the family. Mm-hmm. And so there was no more that I could take from me to give to either one of those organizations. And in my next job, it would have been XO, OIC, something to that effect. Mm-hmm. And that would require additional time from me, which means that either the time had to come from the family or, or it had to come from the family, simple as that. Yeah. There was no other place to pull it from. And so when you think about the family's already sacrificed so much, the kids are already, they're talking trash, right? They're like, you're leaving again, yeah, right? And my daughter's at the age where she's starting to smell herself, and You know, it's one of those things where it was like, all right, I gotta be here. I need to be dad, right?
He needs to be here so she can be alive. I tell him almost every time he's left this last year, I don't know if she gonna be here when you come back, because boy, look at here.
Yeah, a girl. She's a trip. And so, first ministries to your family.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to make sure I honor my vows that I made 15-ish years ago.
Ish. Mm-hmm.
Yep. And it's, you know, take care of the wife and the kids and keep us together. And it boils down to also Book of Mark. There's a verse in there that says, "What shall it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? So to lose his soul."
Mm-hmm.
And so, if I stayed in the Navy, yep, I would have made a lot more money. I would have had a lot of prestige.
Mm-hmm.
But at what cost, right?
Right.
It all comes at a cost. And so, is the prestige worth the cost of broken relationships with the children, right?
Nope.
Is the prestige worth the cost of, marriage ending, and, I'm single and seeing the kids whenever I'm in port, or, holidays and over the summer, right? And that's the story for a lot of people in the military,
Mm-hmm.
and it's unfortunate. And so I consider myself to be extremely blessed, knowing that the person who I married in the Navy is a person who I am married to leaving the Navy.
Amen. Amen.
Right? Because not a lot of people can say the same.
That's true.
And so it's something that I want to honor. And the career's ending, I think, sooner than I thought it would have. There's no guarantee I would have made Commander, made 05, but I'm very competitive, right?
I think you would have.
I think I would have too, but you never know, right?
I know, but I think for me, I felt like if you were going to stay in the time that we were talking about before, where you probably would have thought about retiring, was right at the cusp where you would have potentially made 05.
Mm-hmm.
And me knowing you, if you would have made 05, there was not going to be a retirement. You would have been like, nah, I'm
I
can't
go turn it down.
Right.
Now. My name's on the list.
Right.
That's stealing a promotion from somebody else.
Right.
I gotta honor this.
Yep,
right?
yep. So I was like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with that, because at that point, Kayla would be in high school.
She would have been in high school.
Yeah. Yep. So I feel like, I don't know. I've seen that too many times with the kids don't have good relationship with their parent, and
some little knucklehead boy would have showed up saying all the things, and she would have been listening to it because I wasn't there to prepare her for all the lies that teenage boys say.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I mean, and I think initially I didn't realize how difficult the transition it can be from military to retiring, or retiree, I guess. But I did attend the TAPS class with Mike. It was like a 3-day class, and it kind of prepares you, gives you information for what steps you need to take in order to retire. And it gives you a pretty good amount of information about different programs that are available. Like a lot of stuff I didn't even know about. But it helps you, prepare yourself for your second career outside of the military. It gives you information that your children and your spouse can even take advantage of, like different courses. I mean, just so much information. And so sitting in there, oddly enough, the first day, I think I was the only spouse there. Or maybe I was one of two.
One or two.
Because they were dual military.
Mm-hmm.
And just listening to some of the people who were getting ready to retire, and a lot of people didn't know what they were going to do. Some people didn't know where they were going to live. And I was just so blessed, felt so blessed, well, at least we know where we're going to live. We don't have to figure that part out.
Got a house.
But just listening to them tell their stories and stuff, it's just man, they've spent their entire adult life in this organization. They don't know anything else but this. And it really is difficult. It's like starting all over again.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I told them that I was like, I don't think a lot of spouses understand how hard this transition is. And I think it's important for them to, as they're going through, or even when they get out, try to find a group of people who can relate to what they've gone through. You know, I think the instructor that we had, he talked about how he's in a support group of people who retirees, and how they talk about, you know, it's a way to kind of relive the time when they were in the military, but support each other and the challenges that they go through after the military,
Mm-hmm.
because that's a whole different ball game. You know, dealing with VA and everything that comes with that. So
Yeah.
I say all that to say it is a transition, and I think we don't, as spouses, we probably don't understand that, and we don't give more, you know, grace to the service member to say, hey, you're going through this big transition, and it may be, we don't see it as being as difficult as it is. Not just
Simple.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard.
One of the
It's
people
hard.
in the class worked with somebody who previously retired. His retirement process was so stressful. He ended up going to mental health,
Yeah.
get diagnosed with an anxiety disorder
Yeah.
because of the retirement process, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's not easy. So I would say, and we're still not there yet, right? We still
Yeah.
got a year and 25 days. So I can drop my paper September 1st. So that's 25 days from now. And I'm going to put it in to effectively retire 1 September 2024. All right. But we've started the process, right? Like I said, I went to TAP, got probably 5-6 pages of notes
Mm-hmm.
of what to do already. And it was a blessing because I think when I was there, or we were there, it was like 18 months ahead of my expected retirement date. So I would recommend that if you are on the fence or you don't know, right, or if it's just a thought in the back of your head, go. You
Yeah.
can go as many times as you want to go, right? You got to go once. That's congressional law. But you have to go early enough to let it be effective, because you're going to meet people outside the military. They're going to offer you a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to help you to see if you are ready to take the steps towards retirement, or like, ooh, like, nah, not
You
time
might
yet.
want to wait.
Yeah, you may want to do another tour, because there's so many different elements to it. So advice point number 1, go to TAP as soon as you can. If you are uncertain, on the fence, curious, right, go, right, you will learn. 2, take a notebook and be prepared to take a lot of notes. 3, take your significant other with you, because he or she will receive a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
And they may be thinking about something different from you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They'll have a different viewpoint, vantage point
Mm-hmm.
to bring to the equation, because there were things that were put out that Karina wrote down that she was like this, and I was like, I didn't even think about that,
Mm-hmm.
right? So go early. 3, you gotta have a plan, right?
Yeah.
If you're gonna be living away from your final duty station, right? Like, what's the plan? Where are you gonna live? How are you going to secure that? Are you going to rent? Are you going to try to buy? And oh, by the way, if you have declared that you're going to retire, most mortgage companies won't give you a loan,
Mm-hmm.
because you're essentially saying, I'm quitting my job in 12 months, but please give me $500,000 so I can go buy this house.
Right.
Right. And so it's extremely hard to secure a mortgage, a home loan, whenever you've declared that you're going to retire.
Through
So
the VA, at least.
yeah. So that's something that you got to think about ahead of time, right? Is, if I'm going to, end up in Texas, do I buy property now before I retire?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I going to move there, hope I get a job, things like that, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of tools available for you as you are ending your service, right? Between all the classes, like I just signed up for Onward to Upward to get my project management professional certification. But that's something that you got to build into your plan, because that's a 6-month program, right? Where you get this great certification for free. What? Free 99. But you got to have the time to do it, right? And so if you're trying to turn over your job, do all your medical stuff, right? Do all the VA stuff, and try to do these certifications, like, you may not have time. So that's where you need to build your plan. Make sure you get every itch, owie, boo-boo, injury. My big toenail fell off, documented in your record, right? Because it all goes towards your disability at the end of the day. And, as people who are active duty, a lot of times we sucked it up, right? and we push through the pain, because if I go report that I have this issue, especially in submarine force, right? This was something that was very prevalent, especially as a junior sailor.
They're not going to do anything.
Well, yeah, you get that, but it's also, if I come off the watch bill, now the rest of the team has to suck it up.
Yeah. So now you're taking one for the team.
Yeah.
At the expense of yourself.
Yeah.
Right. Of your future.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so as leadership, we've tried to tell sailors, like, hey, it's okay, right? Like, everyone gets sick, everyone gets hurt. Like, there are a million different ways we can slice this, pie. We can manage the watch bill. Watch bill management isn't, junior sailors' problem. That's leadership's problem. And so, like, I used to tell my sailors, like, if you're sick, hurt, like, go, right? Because I'd rather have you be 100% in standing that watch than you be at 30% not knowing half of what's going on around you, and then you miss something that causes additional issues. So, but it just goes to show you, you got to make sure your medical record's up to date with all those different things.
Yeah, that's something you need to start early too, as early as possible. Like combing through your record too. Like that's one thing Mike did. He was looking through his record, and what's crazy is looking through his record, he found things that he didn't even know. Like, oh, I didn't know I had this, or I didn't know that, because they don't. Yeah, like the doctors don't tell you everything. I remember when he found out he was pre-diabetic at one point. Praise God, he's not anymore. But when he found out, I think new doctor here was like, "Oh, how long you been pre-diabetic?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" So it had been in his file and his record. Nobody thought enough to tell him. So you should, even if you're not going to retire like within the next year or two, it's probably good to just start looking through your record to see your medical record, see what's in there. And if there's issues that you're currently having and you don't see it in there, go to your doctor and have them notated in your file. So you're not having to, at the end of your service, before you get ready to retire, like, oh, let me sit down and think of everything that I had, done, and make sure if you get on it early and start working through it, it makes it a whole lot easier process for you. One of the things that we learned, well, I think we kind of learned before TAPS, but they kind of reiterated, was insurance. Like, when you get out of the Navy, and I forget how long after,
I think 60 days. I think, man. I'm not
so sure, you're not covered by the Navy. And this is for not health insurance. So you do have to worry about health insurance too.
SGLI.
But this is life insurance. So you want to make sure you're covered in that area. So a little bit after you retire, there's only like 2 months that you're covered, and then you have to get yourself new insurance. Now you can continue to keep what they have, but if you do that, it's super expensive. And every so many years it goes up, I believe.
BGLI.
So you want to try to lock in a rate, of course, as early as possible, because the younger you are, the lower the rate. But also, in thinking in that way, you have to think, once you put in your VA claim, the insurance company can see that stuff, like, oh, like they can, that affects it. So you want to try to put it in before you do your VA claim, but you want to ensure that you have insurance before you get out of the military. That way, one, you have a lower interest rate, or not interest rate, you have a lower rate that you're paying every month, but also when you get out of the military or retire, you already have that in place. You're not scrambling at the last minute trying to get it. And then with the healthcare, there are different options for that. I think the big one that they said was dental, that they didn't really offer or something.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I think you can still get TRICARE.
You can still get TRICARE.
But yeah, I think they said if you have other options, then whatever your other option is, that would be paid first, and then TRICARE would be your secondary. But
all VA insurance, TRICARE Prime, TRICARE Select, your post-employment insurer could be through your new job. Like, so many different avenues you can go with it. It's the choose your own adventure kind of thing. So reason number 576 to go to TAP early enough where you can start thinking about that.
But then also important for you to go to TAPS again, because like we went and sat through it, and this was just in May, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, something like that.
So a few months ago. But as you can see, like, I don't remember all the details, even though I did write a lot of them down. I think they give you the option to go multiple times. I think you should go multiple times, because especially if you're not going with the same instructor, you may get new information that maybe the last instructor didn't have, or maybe something that's updated that they're giving you, newly released information. So I think it's
Mhm.
important to go as, even maybe once a quarter, or, you know, just, I mean,
Go
I'm
more than
always,
once. Yeah.
I would try to cover my bases. So my thing is, let's go and see what's new. But yeah, I think
And
TAPS
put
is
you out the
very,
class.
I think, I know I could probably teach the class by the time I'm done, but I think it's important. I think TAPS is very important because it gives you like a whole lot of information that you wouldn't otherwise get. And I mean, it's good that a lot of people who have recently retired will try to give you advice, and that advice is good. But I think without going to the class, you can't get the full picture.
Yeah. Yep, very
So,
true. And keep in mind, right, the military will move on, right?
mm-hmm.
The Navy is going to be okay when Mike Peoples departs from it. Ships will still go to sea. Submarines will still dive and surface. The sun will still rise and set, right? The organization will go on because the military is built to continue on, right? The show must go on. The loss of no one person stops the military organizational complex from going forward. So as much as it feels like, you're indispensable and the command will never figure out how to do it without you, right? Give it a couple weeks. They'll be okay. They will have moved on. They will figure it out. Somebody new will be doing the job and things will go on. So you have to make the best decision for you and your family. And it's hard, right? Like, of course, I'm going to miss the Navy. Um, there's something special about taking a perfectly designed ship, sinking it hundreds of feet of underwater, taking it all over the world, doing all sorts of things that nobody will ever know except you and your closest friends. And then after that, it's still wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Um, it's a camaraderie that is unlike many other branches and communities because you're locked in a tin can with 150 other people
Mm-hmm.
for months on end. And you know so yeah, it'll be missed, but that's where having potential employment supporting the submarine force is that makes me happy.
And you want to do what makes you
And
happy.
you can do, yeah. Now Hawaiian Airlines, if you want to offer me like 300,000 to come work for you, I could be happy doing that too. But yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's important to talk about um, goal setting for your family. Um,
Have a vision.
have a vision. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do I see myself in 5 years? As a
Mm-hmm.
family, where do we see each other? Our entire family in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
How does this align with that? Because I mean, I think over the years we've talked about what our goals are as a family, and individually what our goals are, and I think that has kind of helped lead us to where we are now.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And so I can smile. I'm content. I'm excited. There's a lot of unknowns out there, but that's okay. I'm not afraid of a challenge. Haven't backed down from a challenge in a long time, and nor do I plan to. So retiring will be a challenge, but it'll be a fun one. And sometime next year, friends and family will all come together. We'll all put on our fancy clothes, and I'll walk ashore for the final time. So it'll be good.
Mm-hmm. All
I'm
right.
already working on my speech.
So I think that's all we have for you today. We appreciate you watching until the end. Until next time. See you later.